On the 23rd of September each year, the African New Year traces its origins to the continent's agricultural and lunar calendar. This unique tradition is deeply rooted in diverse cultures and the mother continent's rich history. The African New Year in September is a time of agricultural significance, life cycles, and joyous festivities. Joining us now to remind us of tomorrow's significance on Africa and its inhabitants, it's cultural expert Mkhulu Nsingiza. Mkhulu, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for your time. Now, Mkhulu, all our lives growing up... Mkhulu, thank you for your time. Now, all our lives growing up, we've known the Gregorian calendar to be what guides us in terms of when the year starts, and that being on the 1st of January. Can you speak to us about the spring equinox?
Yes, Thokoza. The spring equinox in Ndlovukazi, it signifies the transition of the sun vis-a-vis Earth. But moving from the northern hemisphere, now coming to the southern hemisphere. Today is the 22nd. The sun officially left the northern hemisphere on the 21st, yesterday. Now, today is the spring equinox day, where, you know, the male as well as the female energies are balanced. Night and the day is balanced today. But tomorrow, in the morning, the sun will make 1 degree southwards, which signifies a new cycle for the southern hemisphere.
So, Mkhulu, why is it that this information has been misconstrued for Africans? Where was the power in Africans knowing their alignment to nature by getting the calendar correct?
I think Africa, you know, when it gained independence, they never looked at the original calendar, because the original calendar is still relevant today. We just accepted a calendar that is based on the northern hemisphere, a calendar that came with a colonial system. So therefore, we've been misaligned for all these years, ever since we were colonized as African people. Now, we are reverting back to the original calendar that reflects the natural flow of the southern, hemisphere. We call, the African calendar because it marks, the journey of the sun throughout, the whole season. So I think it is, that a colonial structure that we adopted, and we are still under the colonial structure now, that forces a wrong calendar for the southern hemisphere. We're not supposed to be using the calendar that we are using as a nation, because it misaligns us.
Speaking of that misalignment, what are the consequences that the continent is facing? Would you say there's a correlation between that misalignment and some of the social ills that we experience in this continent?
Oh, definitely, because if your atoms, your protons, your neutrons are confused because of your consciousness, which is against nature. Your whole system is messed up. Nothing will come right. Look at Africa. Ever since we colonized, there has never been any significant, development on the continent. Why? Because the creative spirit is being suppressed. We are moving against the natural flow of the southern hemisphere.
And I can suppose that the people that followed the calendar correctly, Mkhulu, were very conscious about the preservation of the continent as well as the conservation. Can you talk to us in terms of how we can sort of reverse what we've done in damaging the continent and how we can try and preserve that which we are left with?
Yes, and of course, the calendar of the southern hemisphere affects the whole continent. So therefore, it's upon the president of the continent to realign their nation back to the natural calendar of the southern hemisphere. It demands, it needs a political will, for people to be able. But politicians are not interested in listening to what we are saying. Even if when what we are saying correlates with what happens in the environment. They don't care about that. We've been on this path for over 20 years trying to conscientize politicians to realign us here in South Africa.
And why do you think there's that resistance from politicians to speak to that realignment?
It's because the colonial system they are running is part the calendar of the Northern Hemisphere. It is a package with a colonial system that we are still under. So, because once you realign the calendar, everything has got to change. So the calendar becomes a foundation for a real revolution for African people. I think this is what they are afraid of, because it will destroy the colonial system completely. Once you start, realign your people with the natural, calendar of the Southern Hemisphere. And remember where we are. Remember where we are. I'm sorry, Ndovukaz.
All right, Mkhulu, are you still with us?
Hello, Ndovukaz. I'm so sorry. The light just went off, but it will come on, now.
All right. No, that's all right, Mkhulu. I think maybe what we also need to sort of discuss is, would there be a possibility... Mkhulu, we seem to be losing you there. All right, Mkhulu, it seems as though the line with you is sort of distracted. I'm not sure. It certainly is not load shedding, but that is Mkhulu Nsingiza of the Zinzi Mandela Foundation.